Freeberg, you wanted to talk about Boeing.
Well, I wanted to just highlight the Starliner project and the issues.
Unbelievable.
Give us an overview, and then let's chop it up as we wrap.
2 NASA astronauts flew on the Boeing Starliner capsule June 5th, and they docked with the ISS, and they're now stuck on the ISS, and they might be stuck there until February because the Starliner has a number of technical issues. The astronauts cannot get back in the Starliner and just fly back to Earth. NASA's kind of evaluating the options here on what to do and whether to put them on a SpaceX Crew Dragon capsule in February to get them back. So I just want to talk a little bit about the history of this project and provide a little context before we highlight the particularly acute story of 2 astronauts being stuck in space right now, which is an incredible story. So this is a next-gen space capsule that was designed to take people to and from low Earth orbit, basically to the ISS. And NASA, if you guys remember, in the 2000s, decided to stop making their own vessels and they're going to start using third-party contractors. So they went out and had a competitive bidding process. And ultimately in 2010, they gave both SpaceX and Boeing the winning contracts to develop these commercial crew transportation capabilities. SpaceX obviously developed the Crew Dragon capsule. So it was unveiled in 2010 as the CST-100, Boeing's first commercially developed space capsule. The company would take on all the financial risk for developing it with a fixed price contract from NASA of $4.2 billion. To date, by the way, Boeing has taken a $1.6 billion financial hit on the development of this program. SpaceX, by the way, won a $2.6 billion contract to develop the Crew Dragon capsule. And just to give you guys a sense, the Crew Dragon capsule has flown 13 missions thus far to the ISS. And this was the first crewed mission flown by Boeing, both of which got contracts at the same time. So originally it was going to be a 2017 launch timeline. And I just want to hit on some of the history of the Starliner problems. 2016, it was delayed.
You said, just to confirm, you said it was $4.2 billion, that contract.
That contract with Boeing to develop this Starliner capsule. So the first issues arose in 2016 when there were design problems. The first crewed flight was then pushed back to be scheduled for 2019. In 2018, they found issues with propellant leaks, which led to more delays. 2019, a test flight parachute failed. December of 2019, they had their first uncrewed test flight, and there were software errors that would have caused destruction of the spacecraft. This led to NASA and Boeing submitting 80 different changes that needed to happen before they did their next uncrewed test flight. So they then pushed that all the way out to 2021. Boeing ended up saying it cost us $500 million to do that. Then in August of 2021, 13 propulsion system valve issues were discovered on the launch pad. The flight was aborted and the capsule was returned. They eventually got it up again in space in May of 2022, and it docked with the ISS, and it returned back to Earth. Even though one of the parachutes failed when it returned to Earth, it still made it down. This again led to the 2023 first crewed launch, which means people are in the capsule. This was originally supposed to be in 2017, and they kept pushing it back because of more issues with the parachute system. And then they finally got it launched in June 5th of 2024 with 2 astronauts on board to go to ISS and come back. On the way, they discovered that 5 out of the 28 maneuvering thrusters, which is how they can move this capsule through space to get it to dock with the ISS and ultimately make its way back to Earth, were malfunctioning. They have now discovered 5 helium leaks. Helium is stored in a pressurized system to actually control those thrusters and make it move through space. And now they may not even be able to get this capsule to fly off of the ISS. So on June 28th, NASA announced that while the Starliner is theoretically capable of returning the astronauts to Earth in an emergency on the ISS, the capsule is not approved to fly until these thruster issues and the leaking helium are figured out or better understood, and they have now pushed the decision to the end of August. It would be massively embarrassing for Boeing if these 2 astronauts had to be rescued by SpaceX. It's a Crew Dragon capsule, had to find its way up to the ISS. They hopped on and they came back to Earth. Clearly a massive problem, but it's certainly a personal and a human story now with these 2 astronauts stuck on the ISS. And I know, Chamath, you've had a lot of comments on Boeing in the past, but I mean, does this feel like a continued underscoring of the issues at Boeing?
And just to be clear, Chamath, the statistics are 3 for Starliner, 2 unmanned, 1 manned. And then for SpaceX with the Dragon, they did 11, 8 with NASA, 3 with commercially with like other passengers. Yeah.
Yeah. So the NASA Cargo Dragon, which only has a cargo on it, not people, has completed 9 successful missions to and from the ISS. There are 6 more planned. And they've obviously done 13 missions with the Crew Dragon. And by the way, I don't know if you guys know this. This is a surprise, but exciting to share that we are going to have a Crew Dragon capsule from SpaceX at the All In Summit in LA parked on the launch. You can actually go inside and check it out and take a little tour. It's going to be amazing. So thank you to the SpaceX team for bringing the Crew Dragon capsule. Chamath?
My gosh, I mean, where do I begin? Look, Boeing is these 3 very complicated businesses that try to live as one. So you have a commercial airline business, you have a defense business, and you have the space business. I'll be the first one to say that I think it's extremely difficult to be good at any one of those 3 things. And the probability of getting all of those 3 things right is basically next to impossible. That's just a general comment. And I think that specialization is better. The second thing that I'll say is that I observed this company about 5 years ago, and I wrote about it in my annual letter. And part of the reason why I wrote about it was there was a quote. I'll never be able to judge what motivated Dennis Muilenburger, whether it was a stock price that was going to continue to go up and up, or whether it was just beating the other guy to the next rate increase. He said, he added later, if anybody ran over the rainbow for a pot of gold on stock, it would have been him. Who do you think said this? It was the incoming CEO of Boeing. And I was so flabbergasted because I'd never seen something like this. So in a company where safety has to be the number one priority, to have an individual that's characterized by the incoming CEO as solely focused on their compensation plan sort of explains why there's all these fissures in this company. Because again, back to that famous Charlie Munger quote, show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. If the incentive is safety and world-class engineering, that's what you'll get. But if the incentive is earnings per share growth, then that's what you will also get. And Boeing was a darling of the stock market for a very long time. And now what happens is underneath, the other things that actually should matter, i.e. safety, are slightly deprioritized. And then you have these issues. I really hope these 2 people get back safe. It seems like they're doing a lot of experiments and they love being up there. But it's a little bit unacceptable that they have to be there until February. But I do trust that if Elon has to go and get them, SpaceX will do a great job and they'll be home safe.
Sachs, one of the great things about this, thank God NASA gave 2 contracts out of, they had given 1. You know,
oh my God, could you imagine? If that was lobbied,
you would be asking the Russians
God.
to go get them. And then we're in a little, I don't know if you've been watching this.
This is what I thought we could discuss. It's like, is there benefit in having
being dependent on Putin at this moment in time when Ukraine is making massive gains into Russian territory? I know this hasn't come up all that much, but that would be really dangerous.
But by the way, just back to what Friedberg said before, sorry to interrupt you before you go, Sachs, but why is this even possible? It's exactly as you said, JCal, we have competition. But why is competition possible? It's because of what Friedberg talked about before. We didn't have a set price. The government didn't come and say, you will build it for X and I'm only doing it one time. The free market was able to solve this problem. And it turned out the more capable solution was 40% cheaper than the one that they thought was going to work. And the one that was 40% cheaper was also on time. And the other one was reliable. And this other one, 7, 8, 9, 10 years delayed. It's
100%, Chamath. That's a perfect example.
There are examples
exactly
every day of the fact that these other ideas just don't work.
Yeah, I think we've pretty much beaten that capitalism is the greatest force for innovation and lowering prices. Sachs, your thoughts on this
and helping
situation?
Humanity.
Yeah, God forbid people will get air conditioning at a lower price, and smartphones, et cetera. Sachs, your thoughts here.
Yeah, I mean, look, if we're talking about capitalism, I think about what the Austrian economist Joseph Schumpeter said, which is capitalism is a process of creative destruction. And the creativity happens in the early days when you've got a founder who's creating a startup and the business gets big, but then it gets older and the founder goes away and the company can drift and become bureaucratic. And sometimes it can renew itself And maybe you get a Brian Nickel in maybe to save it, and sometimes it doesn't. And the companies that get old and don't renew themselves eventually fade away, and they get destroyed and replaced by other startups. It's a system that has worked incredibly well in America, and it's the basis for all of our prosperity and innovation. When you compare that to the political process, it's very different. I mean, the political process kind of has this knee-jerk resistance to change and innovation, and it has an impulse to control things. It wants to control prices. It thinks it can solve problems with just top-down mandates, and it doesn't reform itself. It creates new bureaucracies and never gets rid of them. I mean, we create new departments, they never go away, they just keep getting bigger and bigger. There's never any creative destruction. It's just like a
blob.
It's a one-way ratchet of bureaucratic growth. So it's really clear what creates prosperity. And I do think we have now reached a point where the government has gotten so big and so out of control and so expensive that it actually is threatening this engine of creative destruction. And at some point, I think voters are going to have to make a choice about whether they're going to try and rein in the government and create more room for capitalism and innovation, or they're going to allow it to get overtaken.
I love your capitalism quote, and reminds me of the Winston Churchill one, which I'm sure you've heard. The inherent vice of capitalism is the unequal sharing of blessings. The inherent virtue of socialism is the equal sharing of miseries. It's
that's a great quote. Winston Churchill is strong. Man,
strong.
He's
I'd like to hang with that dude.
He's strong.
That's a guy I would like to hang out with.
He would be a fun guy to hang out with.
Teddy Roosevelt.
Oh my gosh.
Man,
Drinking,
I would love
cigars,
to go drinking with Teddy and cigars, guns.
Wow.
I like to go
Churchill
hunting.
took a bath every day.
Freeberg, please don't bring up this whole thing about baths, because then you're going to make me pull out of my phone the 3 or 4 times you called me from the bath and I took a screenshot. I literally, Freeberg's in the bath. He lights candles. He takes a picture of his pale stems and he sends it to me and calls me from the bath, Chamath.
You can't see anything. It's always
scarred.
bubbles.
I have PTSD.
He's called me from the bath. I know he's in the bath because you hear this kind of like echoey kind of, so it does. And it's like oh my God, you're in the bathtub. Yeah. It's
like he's calling
clear that
from
he's in the bathroom.
Zach, I haven't called you from the bath. I'll call you later.
Right.
It's so disturbing.
By the way, I mean,